Hola, hello, bienvenido, and welcome. My name is Annette Perel. I'm a proud Afro-Latina of Panamanian descent and a doula for over 17 years and mom of a son. I created this podcast to help connect people to other Black, Latino, and Indigenous people in the birth field. I also want my listeners to hear birth stories directly from the parents who experienced them. Welcome to the Clearbirth Podcast.
This is the reality. Mm-hmm. You know, you live in the United States. You think that because we spend all this money on maternity care, that you're getting the best care.
Exactly.
And I'm here to tell you that you're not, right? And so I have to inform folks that you're not, right? And if you're not feeling that you're being listened, you know, you're not being heard, then you need to go somewhere else.
On today's show, we'll be speaking with Regina Conceição. She's been a doula for 20 years. We talk about when a husband doesn't get along with a doctor. She has a lot of great stories. I'm excited to share this interview with you. Welcome, Regina Conceição, to the show. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so very much, Annette, for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you tonight.
I know it's been a while since we've seen each other.
Yes.
I think the last time we saw each other, I was speaking on a panel that you did.
Yes.
But before we started, you were telling us this story about your name. So tell us the story of your name.
Yeah. So my name is Regina Maria Conceição. And believe it or not, my mom wanted to name me Susie because she immigrated here, and she's like, "That's a really cool name." And my dad's like, "No." He's like, "I really like Regina," right? And so, so Regina means queen, mm-hmm. and Maria, Mary, Mother, God, and then Conceição, which is like Concepcion in Spanish, means conception. Yes. So my name is really what I do.
Exactly. So it's all tied in.
It's all tied in. So I tell my dad, you know, thanks for, you know, telling
that
mom,
push.
for that push of Regina instead of Susie, because I do not look like a Susie.
My grandmother wanted to name me Bernadette because there are no saints named Annette. Oh. My oldest sister's name is Yvette. My middle sister's name is Paulette. And I was supposed to be Bernadette. Thank God my older sister was like, Annette, it has to be Annette because I'm not a Bernadette.
Right. Right.
Just no way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So welcome. So I'll just start with, what career did you want to do when you were in grade school, high school, and college?
So I can't remember, honestly, in grade school what I wanted to be, but I do know when I was 12 years old, I do remember really getting into the Cosby Show and really learning, like, wait, what does Bill Cosby do? Like, what does Dr. Huxtable do? And I was like, I want to be an OBGYN.
Yes. And
so I really had that in my head to go to college and go to medical school and become an OBGYN. And especially it really, for me, became really solidified, I want to say, when I took a trip with my mom when I was 13 back home. So back home for me is Cabo Verde, which is the west coast of, it's 10 islands off the west coast of Africa. Mm-hmm. And my mom took me for the very first time. And so, and I had an amazing time. I was there for 6 weeks. And on my way back, I'll never forget, it was actually a very tragic story, honestly. On our way back, a young mom was in labor, and mm-hmm. she was, you know, laboring at home because home births are common back home. Mm. And unfortunately, there's a really bad fog. And so when there's really bad fog, and so she had a complicated situation. I didn't know what it was, but mm-hmm. they needed to fly her to the capital. Oh. And so the planes were grounded. Oh. Yeah. And so I was super excited waiting for the baby to be born and mom, and they didn't make it. And so I remember coming back home like, this would never happen. But this was my view of like mm-hmm. birth in the United States. And so I really came back like, I'm going to be an OBGYN. So I headed off to college and I started on that path, but I just wasn't happy with, you know, taking like my bios and the chemistry classes. Like I didn't feel like my grades were good enough. Mm-hmm. And I definitely was at a crossroads. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, man, I really want to help women have their babies. And so when I was in college, one of my professors was like, you know, Regina, you should really think about going into midwifery.
Amazing.
And so when she told me about that, I looked at her, I was like, that's so archaic. Like, they don't really exist. I was like, you know, they don't do that, you know, because I had that the Western view of midwifery, right? And so, when I talked with her and I started taking, these women's studies courses and learning about 80% of the world's population are born at the hands of midwives, I was just like, wait a minute. And then learning about the philosophy, I was like, this is something I definitely really want to, look into. So then I just started, after that, I was towards the end of my college career and I was like, well, I'm not going to go into nursing and I am going to look at becoming a doula. And so I did.
So where did you hear about becoming a doula?
It was really my research. This is back in so long ago, 1999.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. I just did like a quick little search and about midwives and I learned about doulas and I was like, this is what I want to do. And so I took a training and I remember, oh my goodness, I used to go to Fitchburg, Massachusetts because I was born and raised in Connecticut.
Okay.
And so in Fitchburg was, so I used to drive every weekend for this for this doula training for a year.
Really? So there were no doula trainings in Connecticut.
Not that I know of.
Because I took mine in Brooklyn.
Really?
In 2002. Yeah. So
not that
who did you train with?
I can't remember the first trainer, honestly. Yeah. She was from Jersey. I do remember that, but I can't remember her name.
What was the organization?
It was with DONA.
Oh, it was with DONA.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember. And then in 2004, I took another training again with DONA. So I actually moved to New York in 2004.
Okay.
And that was because of a job that I got, working out of Columbia University, out of the School of Public Health. They had a Head Start program. And are you familiar with Head Start? Right.
Yes.
So they had a Head Start program and then they had an Early Head Start program. And so the Early Head Start program is working with children from 0 to 3. Yeah. And so they saw that it was so beneficial. They're like, we want to get these babies in the womb. And so at that time, Early Head Start was giving money to work with pregnant people. Wow. And so they, were looking to start this pregnancy component of this, of the Early Head Start program. And so I came in and the program had this money to train all the staff to become doulas.
Amazing.
Yes, it was amazing. Yeah. And so I had a caseload of women that I followed. So I was in Washington Heights and in Harlem. I had a caseload of women that I used to follow. And I used to, I would do case management.
Yes.
And then also I used to provide doula services, to the clients that really, didn't have anyone, or if they did have someone, their partner couldn't take the time off, unfortunately. So I worked with a lot of immigrants, a lot of undocumented families.
Yes.
And so, or if they had another child at home, so the partner would have to stay with the child. So then I would accompany the mom. And
so which hospitals were you going to back then?
Ooh, the Allen Pavilion, Columbia Presbyterian, Harlem Hospital.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually pretty much the first part of my career was really focused on the Washington Heights in Harlem. And that's where I really got my community doula experience. Because I was working with a lot of pretty much marginalized communities, right? And so connecting them to resources, if they weren't on WIC, connecting them to those resources, connecting them to SNAP benefits, food stamps, to food pantries. So that's where I really learned about community doula work. It's really different.
So you had said you had taken a training, but then you took a second training. So
the second trainer was with Deborah Pascali-Bonaro.
That was my trainer too. So why did you feel the need to take a second training?
Well, I didn't have to. It was just that the program had the money to train. And so Deborah was contracted to come in and to train the staff. So basically I was the assistant because I was already a doula that they had already hired. And so, so I got to take the training a second time.
So how did it vary for you the second time taking it with Deborah than the first time? Because Deborah is a whole different type of training.
Yeah, no, it was so different. It was so different. And I just remember being like, this is nothing like the other trainer that I had. Like she was amazing.
I remember one of the women that I trained with, we had met, I think a month or so after we had all started working, and she was telling a birth story, and she said, she was like, because Deborah's a vibe, right? She is a vibe. She is a vibe. She comes in, she has these long skirts, she has this soft spoken voice, and by the end of the training, you're just like, you're swaying and kumbayaing, and you're like, I want to have 8 kids in my living room with a midwife, like that's the mood. And so, and she always wears those long skirts. So this doula was like, well, her first birth went in with a long skirt, like Deborah. And she was just like, wait a minute. Like, this is not, because she was in a hospital, of course. She was like, I was so inappropriately dressed. She was like, I was freezing. It wasn't right. And I was like, yeah. But Deborah has you in that mood that you're like, oh yeah, that's what I would wear to a birth. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what you would wear to a home birth, but not what you would wear to a hospital birth.
Yeah. So Deborah, she's amazing. And she actually connected me to the Metropolitan Doula group. And at that time, it had started, it was a Yahoo group.
Yes. I remember that.
Right. And so I joined, and then from there, I just started to meet people. And then because of that, that's where I found out about, cause I've always lived in Brooklyn. Once I moved to New York City, I lived in Brooklyn, and then I would commute to Washington Heights and work.
Wow. It's a far commute.
It was an hour commute every day. I was used to it though. But then when I left my job, because I'd started A Passion for New Beginnings, my doula company, in 2007. And when I took the plunge, really 2009, to do this on my own, I was doing private work, which I loved, but I missed the community, work that I did.
Explain a little bit about what's the major difference between doing the community work versus doing private clients?
Well, I will say community work is a lot harder.
Yes.
It really is. But for me, it was this population really needs the service, and they don't have the access to it, right? They don't have the funds to pay for the service, right? And so for me, it was just like, I believe all people should have doulas, right? Yes. And so regardless of your economic situation. And so I was doing private doula work and I was loving it, but I was just like, I know that there is a group of people that are not getting this service because they can't afford it. Yeah. And so I was really missing that. And so, it was because of the Yahoo group, that I found out that Brooklyn was starting, a community doula program. And I was like, oh, wait, what is this? Right. And so, I responded, and then that's where, I work for, I was a consultant for many years, for a Brooklyn community doula program. And then in 2018, I became the coordinator.
Okay.
Right. And so, it's different. I'm still doing, I'm still working with doulas, a group of doulas, and mentoring. Every once in a while, I definitely go to a birth. Cause I have clients that are repeat, and they're like, I want you. I don't want anyone else. I'm like, oh no, but I want you. And I still make the exception. I'm actually fortunate that I could do that. Yeah. And I think that's important because it helps me stay in the game, right? And really, see what our clients are going through, right? And in the hospitals that they're giving birth in, right? So, cause now that I'm pretty much focused in Brooklyn, but, they're giving birth at like Methodist, they're giving birth at, Brookdale, Brooklyn Hospital, Kings County, all of these hospitals, and really getting a sense of how, pregnant people are treated, right? And so, yeah. And
so you also do a lot of advocacy work. Let's talk about how the two mend together, right? Because as a doula, we do advocate for our clients, but we advocate in different ways. But the advocacy work that you've done outside of your clients it looks a lot different. And let's talk about that.
So I'm like thinking about what my advocacy is. My advocacy really is, working with clients, and really giving them informing them that they have choices.
Yes.
Right. And that's one of the things I do when people reach out to me. First thing I ask is, are you happy? Are you happy with where you're getting your care? And if they're like, I'm like, oh, it sounds like you're not too happy with where you're getting your care. And I always give homework.
Yes.
It's like my favorite thing. I give homework. And so I think that that's what my advocacy really is looking at, is really empowering pregnant people to get the information so that they can then make better decisions, right?
Yes.
So on where they're going to, where they're going to get their care, where they're going to give birth, right? And then also my advocacy around maternal mortality, it's something that I think all of us, all doulas, really hold near and dear to our hearts, because we don't want to see any mom and any pregnant person be a victim of that, right? And so for me, my advocacy really is, telling people about, like, listen, I know you think, like, this is the reality. You live in the United States. You think that, because we spend all this money on maternity care, that you're getting the best care.
Exactly.
And I'm here to tell you that you're not. Right? And so I have to, inform folks that you're not, right? And if you're not feeling that you're being listened, you're not being heard, then you need to go somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think that that's the biggest part, that most women don't realize that they have a choice. They think, oh, my insurance says this is where I go and this is who takes my insurance. And so this is where I need to be. Or they're picking their hospital because it's close to their home. Right. And everyone goes there.
Or because they gave birth there.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And not understanding how, how detrimental that can be, and that, or even understanding that, you might be able to have access to midwifery care, which a
lot of people don't know that they have, right?
Yes. Right. So for the most part, when you give them homework, what is in their homework?
Oh, so it's so funny because I have notes on my phone and it's literally, I just copy and send over, right? I copy and paste. So first things first is I always give them the documentary, The Business of Being Born.
Okay.
I was like, this is old, but it's very relevant. And actually, the statistics are worse now, right?
Yes.
So I give them that. And then I actually give them Romper, Doula Diaries, which I think is a really good docuseries.
Yes, it really is.
Little 8-minute videos to see, like, what doula care looks like. Yes. And I don't just push that because I was on the second episode, but I really think it's a really good teaching tool, for people to, to see and get a sense of what type of birth they want, right? And so I give them that, and then I give the birthing centers information. So like the Brooklyn Birthing Center. Now I'm giving the Jazz. I give Park Slope Midwives, and then I also give the New York City home birth midwives like link.
Yes.
And I give them that, and then next thing you know, they're like, I'm not happy with where I'm going, and I'm switching. And I'm like, really?
That's a great push. That's a great push. Let's talk about that second episode.
Yes.
Because I saw it. It was incredible. So tell the story.
Right.
So
it's so interesting because unfortunately they didn't allow the cameras into the hospital.
Yes.
And that was very challenging. So the couple that I worked with, I love them. They're amazing. They're so funny. And, we got to the hospital and she was about like 2 or 3 centimeters. She was progressing. And then her doctor came in a couple of hours later and decided to check her. And then I remember seeing the amnio hook. Just like, what's she doing with the amnio hook?
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, is she going to say something? And so and the thing that's upsetting is this is a Black doctor with a Black family. So, I'm expecting you're going to communicate, but just because not all skin folks are not all skin folks are skin folks, right?
Yes.
So I remember seeing it, and her Mignelle's husband stepped outside, and he came back inside, and I'm like, Jamal, it looks like Dr. So-and-so is going to be doing this. And he's like, wait, what? And he's like, we didn't have this conversation. So, by this time her hand was already up in there, and she literally broke her water. And it was like, after that, it was like not cool. And he told her off, and he's like, do not do anything without us consenting, you know? And so that birth was, it was really challenging, because after that, it definitely changed the tone.
The dynamic.
She definitely tried to like call security on the dad.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was just causing a lot of stress. And it was me, dad, and grandma who were there. And then, as things were, and then she ended up getting an epidural later. No, she didn't get epidural, actually. She got Stadol. She decided to get Stadol. And then towards the end, she was just so stressed just because she felt the tension, right?
Definitely.
So she basically kicked her mom and her husband out and was like, only Regina's going to stay. And I'm like, wow. So I came in and then I told her, I was like, well, I get you closer to when it's time to push. Would you like for us to, have your mom and your husband come in? And she's just like, yeah, okay. And so I remember, sending them a message and be like, I'm going to get her. And then you guys just hang out in the waiting room. And then when we're ready, you'll come in. And so they were able to attend, to see their granddaughter and their daughter be born.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was a great experience to work with them. How did I find them? Oh, they were a referral.
Yeah.
And then I met with them and it was great. It was a really good fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, why, in part you inform your clients about choice and also, the business of being born. Do you give them any readings on the maternal mortality rate, or do you discuss what the maternal mortality rate is amongst women of color?
I definitely discuss the maternal mortality rate, and I tell them, in New York City, it was 12. It's down to 8, but the year that we just had,
yes,
I see that number going up, right? So I definitely tell them, what our rate is as a city, and then I tell them about nationally what the rate is for Black women.
Do you know the rate off your top of your head, what the rate is for currently?
Well, it's 8.
8, yeah.
It is 8.
So women of color are 8 times more likely to die giving childbirth
in New York City
within the first year of delivering their baby. Yeah. And part of the reason behind that is,
there's a lot of reasons, right? So we're looking at bias, discrimination. Yes. We're looking at sometimes not being listened to, right? Yeah. Being ignored. We're looking at sometimes comorbidities, unfortunately. Yes. But a lot of it, really, I feel like for New York City, it's like women are not being heard.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And informed consent, right? Because part of what I feel that is not happening often, and you can tell me if that's your experience too, is that they're not having conversations with their provider, their OBGYNs, about their care. And it's just, let's come into the office. We measure you. We weigh you. How are you feeling? Blood pressure. And then one hand is out the door before the other hand is like right out the vagina.
Because they're not given that space.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly,
they're not given that space to come in and sit and have
that conversation. Yeah. Right. Because insurance regulates how many patients they should have. I have one of my best friends is an OBGYN, and when she went into practice, she had to go into a co-practice, right? Because she was like, the malpractice insurance alone is $1 million. And she was just like, there's no way she could carry that load by herself. And that kind of saddens me too, because it does force this kind of high turnover, not being listened to, not having the time, because they have to see on average 40 patients a month or more. So when you speak to your clients about that and then they switch, what is they're like, this is night and day. Yeah.
This is night and day. And I'm so glad that you gave us this information, because I was being rushed at my appointments, and now I actually have time to, my midwife is sitting with me and talking, answering my questions and talking to me, and I don't feel rushed and I don't feel dismissed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that feeling of being dismissed.
Yeah. I find that too, that's the hardest thing to get across to people sometimes who are with OBs, because it's like, I've been with my OB for years, or my OB knows me. And inside I'm just like, no, your OB is, unless your OB is your childhood friend that you grew up with, they don't know you. No. And it's not the same level of care that you would get. And, you know, being able to say, like, your midwife is going to spend a half an hour to an hour just talking to you about your care. Like, they can't wrap their minds around that. Or what happens if I have to have a C-section? And I'm like, the same thing that would happen in a multiple practice. If your doctor might not be there, it might be someone else. Right. You know, but your midwife will be there. Or, you know, out of hospital, like, you know, for my first, I'll just go to the hospital.
Yeah. I want to say that with, the clients that was featured on Romper, she went to her postpartum visit and they fired her.
Yes.
She was like, she got another provider, and she said, the next baby, we're going with a midwife.
That is wonderful. Right? Yeah. Right. But, you know, I similarly had a situation like that with a client where the hospital, my client was sent to the hospital for low fluids and was sitting in the waiting room for hours, like 5 hours. And they were also moving into a larger apartment, luckily in the same building, but they were moving, so her husband couldn't be with her. And her husband finally, after all that time, called the doctor and like lambasted them. And he was a lawyer. And he was like, if this was an emergency, why has she been sitting there for 5 hours? This is clearly not an emergency. Let her go home. And as soon after that call, they found her room. And then it was like, we were going to be induced. We're going to induce you. And so he's like, I'm in the process of moving and having to figure that out. And I was like, I will come. And when I got there, the environment was so contentious with the doctor and the husband that the doctors refused to speak to him and was speaking to me. And I just kept like going, but no, like you have to talk to him. And the mom was lying on the bed crying. And I was just like, I talked to the doctor and I was like, listen, we have to figure something out. I was like, cause this is not okay. And the mom was so worried that she was going to have a C-section. And I never promise that. But I promised her that she would not have a C-section. And I was just like, please. You know, everything was fine. Baby was fine. Baby was, you know, a little underweight, but the mom was small. And, and I remember looking at the dad, the doctor came in and the doctor just was like, I'm not talking to you. The exact words she said, and walked out of the room. And I looked at him and I was like, you are a lawyer. You know how to speak to people. You know how to make this right. Go and speak to her. You have to make this right. I mean, she is clearly being unreasonable, you know, because there's no other way around it. Right. Unfortunately, we have no other choice because it would be a resident and they didn't want that option. Right. So he did speak with her and did make it better. And it got a little bit better. Thankfully, the mom had a vaginal birth. It was a long process because, you know, she also was very spiritual and her mother had passed not too long. And so we did a lot of work about like, you know, how our ancestors are with us and that she truly has to believe that her mother is there helping this along as well. So we just have to block out the doctor and what's happening. And luckily it all worked out. But we know that these are the things that we're faced with when we go into the hospitals with our clients when there's not that conversation and that care, right? Because most of the times dads aren't even brought into the conversation or into the room for the visits because they're so quick and the doctor doesn't know them either. So once they change to midwifery and have that experience, what has been, besides them, of course, loving you to death for helping them come to that, you know, how how often do you have clients who then turn around and go back to OBs, or do they all just stay with midwives?
They stay with the midwives.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't had anyone go back.
That is great. Yeah. And so when you were doing community work in the beginning in Washington Heights, like, what are some of the changes that you've seen, like now, if there was that have happened? Like, for example, I remember, when I first started, similarly, I worked in Jamaica, Queens, in a lot of the hospitals out there, because there was a woman who had gotten a grant to help that community. I forgot the name. I think it was Heart Song or something like that. It was Jamaica, Queens, and also Brooklyn. Okay. And I remember that it was like Pitocin was just like the second they said the word Pitocin, it was just like, we're going to have another C-section, that baby. Like, please let this be the baby. Right. That doesn't go into distress with Pitocin. Right. And now they turn Pitocin off because they realize it metabolizes through the system. Right. And there's like, okay, great. But the level, have you noticed a difference in the level of care? Or is it still pretty much the same? Do you feel with those providers that you were seeing early in your first years?
Well, see, I haven't, because I'm not in Washington Heights. I haven't. Yeah.
No, but even in Brooklyn, you like seeing the same level of like.
Yeah. Definitely at like certain hospitals where inductions take longer.
Yeah.
Which is always like, why is this taking 3 or 4 days?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it makes you question, like, whereas you go to other hospitals like NYU, it's, 24 hours.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Going to, like a Woodhull or something. It's 3 to, I remember doing a 4-day induction. I haven't done that in years, but I definitely.
Knock on something because.
Right.
That's coming for you now that you said it.
No, I'm not taking that. Yes. But yeah, definitely, the inductions. Yeah. Different.
Yeah. Very different now.
Very different.
Yeah. I remember too that, there are times when as a doula, working with clients who, like you said, like clients who couldn't afford my services that I was working with through the program, and their experience of not knowing what a doula was, and then afterwards and having that support. Like I had a client, a mom one time who, regardless of what I was saying to her to tell her doctor, he still cut an episiotomy, even though she was not consenting to it. And she was like, I was like, they're about to cut an episiotomy. Are you okay with that? And she was like, no. And she literally put her hand out like, no. And he cut her anyway. And she, afterwards, going to the postpartum visits, I was just like, okay, how am I going to have to, console her through that whole experience? And what she said to me just solidified doula work. She was just like, I was so grateful you were there. Like that didn't happen. In her mind, she was able to like process it and deal with it and let it go because I was there. I was supporting her through that process. So have you similarly had experiences like that?
Oh man, I remember having an experience with a young couple. And, she was in triage for like 12 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And then she finally gets a room. First of all, she was in triage and they weren't trying to allow her to get up and walk. I'll never forget that. And the doctor comes in. It's like, tell them you want to get up to go to the bathroom. And it's like, oh, you can't do that because and she asked him, like, because the baby will fall out. And I was like, what? Like, the baby? Did you just say the baby's gonna fall out? Like, she's only 5 centimeters. Yes, like, exactly. How is the baby gonna fall out, right? And I was like, if you don't let this young lady move, like, her mom is calling and she's still in this triage, and if she's gonna come in and she's gonna rip you, you know? And so finally, she was given a room and things progressed pretty quickly. And she was getting ready to push, and all of a sudden, all these residents come in. No one doesn't introduce themselves, and they're screaming at her to push. And then she just doesn't push, right? Because she's just getting herself together. And I remember, and then I just remember telling her, are you okay? And she was just like, yeah, Regina, I'm going to push, but I just need a moment. Right. And she was getting yelled at. And I turned around and I remember telling the doctor and everybody else, it's like, everybody shut up, right? Just shut up, because when she's ready, she's going to start pushing, right? But I remember like the way that they handled her, like with the hand, and I was so distraught, right? And even, she delivered the baby. She was great. And I remember going home crying because I felt like they mishandled her because of the way that they were touching her, the way they were doing that, going in. You've seen that, right? You've seen, what did I call it? Like, it's the obstetric violence, right? The abuse that you see. And I remember seeing that and being so upset. But, when I went home and I'm thinking I'm going to have this conversation with her, and she's just like, it was great. Thank you so much. I had an unmedicated birth. And I'm like, I went home, right? Yes. And I went home crying. Thank God I had my doula support to doula me through, because I was like, I'm so over watching this obstetric violence and yelling and, and not listening to people. It was, definitely. Yeah. But she was grateful that I was there, and I was just like, all right, well, this is her birth, not my birth.
Exactly. So let's talk about, you mentioned your doula support.
I have a huge tribe.
Yes.
And I'm so grateful for that tribe. And honestly, I didn't get the tribe though until 10 years into
me too.
my doula work.
Me too.
And I wish I had it sooner.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was different. There were different times, right? We weren't, even though we had Metro Doula, I remember going to a couple of Metro Doula meetings, and there were like 2 people there, including myself. And it was just like, where is everybody? We weren't really meeting in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, like, I got my little doula tribe with my work at Columbia Head Start, because it was 3 doulas. We were 3. And so that was my little group. And then when I, started doing work in Brooklyn, I got the tribe with the community doula program. And so, I don't even know where I'd be right now, but I definitely feel like I wish I had it in the beginning because of the burnout, right? Yes. Definitely went through the burnout.
So speak about that. Speak about what the burnout is and what does that look like?
Well, especially when you're working with community clients, so you're dealing with a lot of issues, right? Yeah. Like housing insecurities, food insecurities, mental health. It's a lot, right? Domestic violence, right? And so you're just trying to help the client as much as you can, right? And so, and then sometimes you get clients that are constantly reaching out to you and calling you and texting you. And for me, I always felt that I had to respond, right? And not
boundaries.
Setting that boundary.
Yeah.
And then getting, and then also going to the birth that took, 2 and 3 days, right? And then coming home like so exhausted. Like you really feel like you give birth, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Only to turn around to have to go to another birth.
Right.
All over again.
Yeah. And so, and even like processing, birth experiences, right? In different hospitals, and having, your doula tribe to talk things through with you. If a client is getting stuck and you're doing all these things that, you're using everything in your bag of tricks, right? And then you're like forgetting. And then next thing you know, you have, someone's like, well, have you tried this? I'm like, I actually didn't do that. Thank you so much, And so it's just like, it's just, or even just stepping out just to get that fresh air and then coming back. Yeah. And so, my tribe.
I find that very important. The tribe is just someone who bears witness. Like we bear witness for our clients, but someone who bears witness for us, right? Who's holding that space for us to say, you got this. Or, yep, that's really fucked up what just happened. And, validating it for you. And then you're able to kind of step back in and be there for your clients. You also you mentioned that you mentored.
Yeah. So I definitely mentor a bunch of doulas, clients that have become doulas. That's really exciting. One of them is like, you're my life doula, Regina. And I love working with newer doulas and really helping them navigate these doula streets.
Yeah, because
right?
it's rough out there.
It is
in the beginning.
So rough.
It really is.
Right? And if I could help them, and avoid, the mistakes that I made in the beginning, I'm definitely gonna, talk to them about the boundaries. Yeah. Right? 'Cause that's super important, about the self-care, right? After the births. It's like super important. Yeah. 'Cause I didn't get that. That's one of the pieces that I didn't get in my training.
There wasn't. I remember when I finished my training and looking for mentoring, and they had one doula in Donna who was a mentor for the region.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, how does that work? Yeah. That can't work. Like, there's no way. And just, luckily I was in a true partnership with another doula, and we figured it out together. Yeah. And then, the pitfalls that we went through. So is that also part of your company, that you have mentoring through that? So that's how people find you?
So yes. So I definitely have, a newer doulas are reaching out to me, cause they want mentorship. Right. Yeah. And so, and I tell them, like, I think for me, how I got my experience, honestly, was doing community work. That really helped, right? Yes. And so I give that as an option. Like, if you're looking for clients, to go that route. Yeah. Going that route with like Healthy Women, Healthy Futures, which is a citywide, doula program, right? And, working with them to get the clients. And then talking it through, right?
Like, how do you interview? How do you hold a prenatal? I remember I had a mentee, and she was like, I'm going to my meeting. And I was like, great, contact me after. And 3 hours later, she sent me a text, and she was like,
3 hours.
3 hours. And I said, what were you doing for 3 hours? And she was like, I was taking notes, and I was like, no, honey, that's the prenatal. I was like, you don't do that at the interview. No. They get to know you, you get to know them, 45 minutes, and that's it. I was like, you did way too much. And she was like, oh, but we were having such a good time. I was like, yes, you will have those clients where you have such a great time, but you still have to be mindful of your time. Yeah. I was like, because there are people out there. I remember I interviewed with a woman one time, and she was like, I was doula number 11. And I remember sitting there going, I wish you would have told me that before, because I would have told you I would not interview with you. You do not need to meet 11 doulas.
You don't.
Like, and I told her, I was like, we're all a bunch of great women. Yeah. So 11, right? Like you're just wasting people's time,
right? No, I actually, when clients reach out to me and I would ask them like, how many doulas have you? Well, you came highly recommended. I'm like, yes, I'm so grateful.
Go meet other doulas.
But I need you to meet other doulas, yes, right? And they're like, you're the only person. I'm like, no. I need you to meet at least 2 other doulas, right? Yep. Because this needs to be a really good fit. Yeah. And as much as I want your business, it has to be a good fit, right? And I tell them, I was like, there are so many amazing doulas in New York City. And like I said, it has to be a good fit, right? And so they look at me like, do you not want me? I'm like, I'm not saying that I don't want you. Exactly. I just want you to know. And I've had clients that decided not to go with me, and they went with one of my mentees, right? Yeah. Because they were like, oh, actually, it's better. It's a better fit,
and that's
the cost was,
Exactly. And that is, I find that is the thing that is the hardest to translate in the beginning, right? Because everyone wants to work. Everyone wants, New York City is expensive. We all have to live here, and we have to make a living. But just because I can doula everybody does not mean I should. Right. And when you find that person that you take on and you're not too sure about, it just has never worked out. Never worked out. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. You're a great mentor.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is really great.
I think I remember one lesson that I learned too with the client where I tell my mentees all the time, make sure you get your money at 36 weeks. Right? Because I definitely had a client that did not pay the remainder balance. Yeah. And that That took me a couple of years for me to process and let it go.
Yeah. There are a lot of doulas who still get the payment after the birth. But yeah, you will have some clients who will pay you less because they feel that you didn't do X or Y or want, this work is really hard and challenging in the sense that, we're freelancers, and when you get a bad review, it can really affect your career.
Yeah.
And I definitely had something like that happen to me, and it was just like, because they chose not to speak to me. And, so yeah, that is great that you make sure. And that
was because of what I experienced. I was like, I don't want anyone to
go through that.
How can you do that when first of all, I gave you a sliding scale, right? I gave you a sliding scale. And then prepared you prenatally for the birth, right? Yeah. And I get to the hospital because you finally just, decided to say, okay, we're heading to the hospital. I get to the hospital and you're like 8 centimeters. That's great, right? And and then like within 30 minutes, you're pushing a baby, right? Mm. So that's amazing, right? And
they don't see that it was the preparation that you did to help them get to that point,
And those beautiful pictures that you have of me that I captured when you were pushing and sent them to you, like that's because of me, right? Yeah. And I've been never paid the remainder, and they were like, we felt that you weren't there, and I was just like, wow. And I, remember just thinking like, do I want to take this to small claims? I was like, it's just so not worth it.
Yeah.
It's so not worth it. You know, and I just had to, I let it go.
Yeah.
I had to let it go.
What do you love most about doing this work?
What I love is I love watching parents be born.
Yeah. In the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like my favorite. It's like literally watching a parent be born.
Yeah. I used to have this really, I used to really love watching women's backs when they were in labor, and their bodies change. And 'cause we spend a lot of time at the back, right? And you could see how their bodies are changing and how the baby is moving through their bodies. And yeah, I used to love that. Yeah.
No, that is another good, definitely is another good one.
Yeah.
There's just something of, when the baby is just witness. I mean, they're already parents.
Yes.
But it's like.
But they don't know that they're parents.
Right.
Yeah. They don't look at it like that. Like I always say, Happy Mother's Day and Father's Day when they're pregnant. Right? Because I'm like, because that's what you are. Like, you have to start owning that early. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. That is a good part. What do you find as the biggest challenge?
Well, right now, COVID, obviously.
Yes. COVID is definitely. How has COVID changed your practice?
Well, for me, thankfully, I mean, I don't take a lot of private clients. Usually it's 3 to 6 per year just because I have a full-time job, you know what I mean? And so it's a lot. And so I do private work in partnership with another doula. I'm
good.
So blessed that I have a team of doulas that I tell clients you could pick.
Yeah.
Right? So I went to the hospital for the very first time last Monday, and, that went pretty well.
Yeah.
But I had not been in the hospital since last November.
Wow. That is a long time.
I'm trying to think what are some challenges. Well, really, I mean, working with getting clients I actually like getting clients earlier in their pregnancy. I know that the recommendation is hiring a doula at 7 months. But for me, if you're pregnant and you're thinking about having a doula, like I need you to do the research early. Yeah. Right? Do the research early because we have so much information, right? Yeah. I have so much information. And I have gotten clients that I've gotten early that they're switching. And I give them that information in small bites. Yes. Right? And so... And then things happen, right? Things happen in between. Like I have a client right now that's due in December, right? And so she ended up having to go to the hospital because of her blood pressure, right? And so me and the partner doula were with her on the phone and giving her, you know, words of encouragement, and the husband, right? And she's like, I'm so glad that she's not due until December, right? Yeah. And so this happened like a month ago, right? And so she was just like, now I see why you stress early in the pregnancy, right? And so the challenge for me is getting the clients when they're, you know, towards the end of their pregnancy, and then they're not happy with the care. Yeah. And then trying to get them to switch. It's so giving hard. Them the information, and then they're trying, and then it doesn't work out. Yeah. So that's the challenge, right? Yeah. But I think that's the biggest challenge right now for me, is just really like getting them towards the end of the pregnancy. Yeah. But I've kind of created this, I think I've put it out in the universe that I manifested. Like one of my doula colleagues, she's like, you're getting all these amazing clients. I was like, cause I've been in doula for 20 years.
Exactly.
And I was just like,
that you have to, I remember when I started manifesting clients, cause I was just like, I live in Manhattan. I live on the Upper West Side. And I've been, when I started, I went everywhere. I went to Jersey. I went to the Bronx. I went deep in Brooklyn. I was everywhere. And then after a while, I was like, okay, I can't keep doing this because it's just too much. And I was like, okay, I need Brooklyn and Manhattan. And then I started getting Brooklyn and Manhattan. And I was like, oh, wow, this is nice. And then I was like, okay, Manhattan and Washington Heights, you know, and it's like, great. Right. You know, and then a couple of times I was like, in my neighborhood. Right. And started getting that. And I was like, I want to walk to a prenatal. I want to walk to the postpartum. Yes. And it started, It started
to happen, right? And I'm getting I get clients early in their pregnancy, because I tell them, I was like, listen, whether you hire me at 7 months or at 8 months, the fee is still the same.
Yes, exactly.
So you're better off hiring me sooner, right? And so, I love that. Like, now I'm like, this is great. Yeah. Like, I had someone literally email me and was just like, I'm looking for a Black doula and I'm 15 weeks pregnant. I was like, yes!
I'm your person. Yes, that's your person. Yes. So what's the latest you've ever gotten hired?
That would be with my community clients, right? So probably like 38, 39 weeks. And then, no, there was definitely like I got matched with the client, and then like 4 days later there was a baby. Like, and I remember getting matched and squeezing in that one prenatal, even though I'm supposed to like do 3. Yes. And that, I mean, it worked out, but they were just like, "Whoa, I'm so glad that that you were able to squeeze in that prenatal visit for me to
understand." Exactly.
But they were like, "I wish I had you sooner." I'm like, "I wish I knew you sooner."
Exactly. It would have been easier. Yeah. The latest I've gotten hired was, I had a client I was at a doula meeting, and this woman was calling around. She was in labor and she was having a VBAC in labor, and luckily I was available, and I was just like, okay.
And she hired you on the spot?
Hired me on the spot, because everyone else was like, they weren't available. Wow. And so that was the latest that I had ever gotten hired. And I often tell people, I was like, I tell people about that because clients ask, like, what is a challenge? And I was like, that's challenging because she's in labor. Yeah. She's with a practice. She was trying to have a VBAC with a practice that wasn't friendly for VBAC. So that was a challenge, because what are we going to do? Stay home. Right. But that was the hardest, because you have to have that trust in your doula to know that, I can stay home. Everything is okay. For it to happen. So the next segment that I like to get into is called, it's just daily inspiration. So what is your favorite scent?
My favorite scent?
Yes.
I love rose.
Rose. That is a nice one. I love rose water. Yes. That's my tonic.
I have rose water. I use a rose oil for my face. Rose.
Yeah. I use rose quartz on my face too. Yeah. What's a book, film, show, or podcast that's inspiring you right now?
Well, I'm listening to the Girl Trek podcast.
I love Girl Trek.
I love Girl Trek. I'm on Black History Boot Camp. Yes. The 3rd edition. And
are you doing the walk too?
Yeah, I walk.
Okay, good.
No, actually, Girl Trek is the reason why that I'm walking, because it started end of May that I started listening to their podcast, and I walk every day. And as a matter of fact, let me see how many what's my steps? I'm at 10,000 steps. And
there you go.
I started at 10,000 and then now I'm at 50. I've increased my goal to 15,000 a day.
Yeah, that's my goal, 15.
And that's because of Girl Trek, right? And so I have to walk every day and I put in the podcast. And I'm also listening to the Michelle Obama podcast.
How's that going? I haven't listened to that one yet.
It's really good.
Yeah. I mean, anything Michelle Obama does is really good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have to listen to that one. What quote inspires you?
Well, there's a quote that I have. It's my email signature and it's birth related. And it's, and I love it, but I'm like, why can I never remember this quote? I have it written. I'm going to forget it. I can't
look it up.
I have it. Hold on.
Yeah, you have definitely, because even though you have it there, it's not something that you read every time. You know it's there. That's what
birth must be honored and given every opportunity for the growth that is inherent in its potential.
That's beautiful. Who is it by? That's
by Raven Lang. And this has been my signature for about like a good 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And I feel like this is, and not just like the birth of anything, right? Just giving yourself the opportunity to birth things.
Yeah.
So that's the quote that I really love.
That's nice. I really like that. Which leads to our next segment, which is birth stories. We talked a little bit about the story of your birth on how you were born. If you'd like to share that with us.
So I actually was supposed to be born in August. And my mom...
You missed out on being a Virgo.
I did. I did. Virgo, Leo too.
Yes.
I was actually, I think I was supposed to be, the due date was August 17th and I was born July 17th.
Oh, wow.
And I'm such a Cancer. I really am.
Yeah.
And so, so my mom, I guess I remember she tells me that, she felt the pains and my dad rushed her to the hospital and, she said she woke up and she's like, oh, there's no baby. And she's like, I had the baby. And I'm like, you don't remember? She's like, I don't remember having you. And I'm like, I was born in 76. I don't really think that there was twilight in 76, but my mom doesn't remember. But what's really funny is that she said that when she went in to go have me, I guess she was dreaming. And so she used to watch Good Times. And so she said she dreamt that she had JJ from Good Times. And the funny thing is that my mom immigrated to the U.S. in 76 from Cabo Verde, right? And so she came. So she really didn't speak English, but she just really loved Good Times because it's so funny. I was. So and then she realized she's like, oh no, it's not JJ, it's Gina, it's Regina.
Yes, my baby.
My baby. Yeah.
Oh, that is so great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah,
it has been such a pleasure to have you on my podcast. I'm
Thank
so
you
glad
so much.
we really got this together.
So beautiful. It's so nice to talk and share stories.
Definitely. Once COVID is over, we're going to have to go out for drinks. And
I miss dancing. Do you dance?
I dance. I know you salsa dance.
I salsa dance. I merengue, bachata.
I have been learning salsa dance. I have a really good friend in high school who is a salsa teacher, salsa dance teacher. I took salsa dancing for years, but I just haven't gotten the practice of like going out. I will go salsa dance.
I'm really big into kizomba, which is from Angola, and it's partner dancing, and kizomba and samba are like my favorites because it's also very it's so fun.
Yeah.
I go to festivals and I'm like, this year everything is canceled.
Yeah, exactly.
I miss my, after, and dancing keeps me grounded, right? With all that's going on and like birth work being so much, it's just like, go let it out on the dance floor, right?
Exactly.
So that's part of my self-care. So right now I'm like dancing in my house.
Yeah, I have that. My friend just contacted me the other day and she sent me a text and she was like, this is happening right now. I'm not sure if you can make it. And it was a link to...
was it a class?
It was a link to a class for traditional...
Belly dancing?
No, not belly dancing. Traditional Puerto Rican, why can't I remember the name? With the dress.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Yes. What is it called?
It's gonna haunt me. It's gonna haunt me. That, and
Does it begin with the C? It's not C.
I forgot the name of it. I can't remember. It's driving me nuts.
It's dancing to Bomba y Plena?
Yes.
But what's the dance called? I don't know. I don't know the dance, but I know the music. Like, okay.
Exactly. And she was there with the drums and she's like, she was teaching the class and she's like, step 1, 2, skirt. I was like, oh my God.
Oh man.
And I had hurt my foot, so I couldn't really take the class. So I was just like, the next time this happens, I definitely.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to let you know when I go dancing.
Yes, I will be down.
I'm always bringing.
Yeah.
I'm always inviting folks.
I love it. I love it too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Regina. It's been great having you.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Oh, wonderful. Gracias. Thanks for listening to the Clearbirth Podcast. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. You can find me on Instagram at the Clearbirth Podcast. If you want to send me an email, you can reach me at theclearbirthpodcast@gmail.com. Adios, hasta luego, goodbye, until next time.